So again, training process, needs assessment, determine the outcomes, develop the lesson plans and activities, schedule and conduct the training, and then evaluate it, then revise it. The needs assessment means we're going to go out and we try to figure out what do we have to do. You know, sometimes people have training, they have to meet the requirements of the standard, and they're going to have to go in and the standards being the OSHA standards, and they'll say, okay, we need to cover the required training programs we have to do every year. We have to do bloodborne training every year. We have to cover different training like forklift evaluation. We have to do every 3 years. I cover lockout training every year, even though you'll need to do it once with authorized and affected employees. We often cover what you do in emergencies. That's required every year to be done. So these are different things that people have to go in and do, and you have to say, okay, I like doing a training calendar for the year, and we can sit there and think about the different topics that we're going to cover. And again, the end results is, you know, do we want to make people be able to recognize the hazards, know how to use the equipment, or are we going to make it do it something different, where they're going to be able to have a skill they're going to have to demonstrate? So if you're doing forklift training, then you're going to have to do, probably by OSHA's rules, a classroom, give them a test, then you have to evaluate their driving ability and, you know, and evaluate and say they're good or not, and then you can give them a certification. So the training needs, like one of the things that I've always been pushing everybody, you got every piece of equipment in the facility that somebody uses, you need a training program. Anywhere from a circular saw to a piece of equipment like this, which is a front end loader or a skid steer piece of equipment. And you want to document it, because when these accidents happen, you know, they're going to ask you, did the person get any training? And you don't want to be out there. I mean, ladders are the #1 cause of falls, right up there with roofs. And I get so many people that said, I've never had a training class on how to use a ladder safely. And that's not good, because, you know, that's a, you know, you're doing training, you got to deal with at least the top few issues on the fall hazards. You know, it's roofs and ladders pretty well tied all the time. Then it's falls through skylights. Then it goes through scaffold falls. And you got to, if you have that equipment at your facility, you need to talk about that and how to do it safely. Again, a lot of this training requirements are going to be based on the work site, manufacturing versus construction. You have to go out and deal with the different languages that could be out there. So I was dealing with a large hotel chain yesterday, 20 languages out of their 1,000+ employees, 20 languages. So, you know, the advantage of it is that if you have guests from all over the world, you have 20 languages that you can have to help the guest out. But if their native language is in Polish, Spanish, or something else, then, you know, they need to have training that they understand. You cannot just give training in English and say, well, you know, they can follow along, because if they can't read the English, it's not going to do it. People will sign it, but you're not really doing training. So the training needs, you know, we always talk about, you know, think about it in any facility you're at. If you're making, you know, wood pallets or something, the people who are putting the pallets together with nail guns are going to be the priority, because nail guns cause a lot of injuries. Anybody using saws, you know, when we look at amputations with saws, it's 200 a year. So you're talking quite a lot of amputations with saws. People in the shipping department, where they bring in the drums and box and separate it and get ready for the shipping in the plant, probably not so much. The office people have hazards, but not as much as the people out in the manufacturing side. If you're in a warehouse, you're going to have people who drive forklifts. The #1 hazard is they hit people. And then, of course, you have an ergonomics hazard if you have people picking orders at these warehouses. How much do they walk? How much can they pick? How much can they lift? All these things you have to talk about. And so sometimes, you know, you're going to have to sit there and say, okay, what are all our issues that we have to deal with? Not everything is covered by an OSHA law or some other rule. You know, ergonomics is not, violence is not, heat stress is not. So you need to have rules for those issues if they're going to be at your plant. So the learning outcomes, you think about it, okay, I'm going to train people in heat stress. You know, we got, let's see, I think it was Morocco this week got up to 50 Celsius, which is incredibly hot. And, you know, you are out there and you're doing work in that country, Holy smokes, you could die in an hour. We have people, when I looked at the 2022 accidents in the United States were heat related, 53% were over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. 53. You go back 20 years ago, most of the people were 2/3 were in the 90s and 1/3 in the 80s. Now you're talking over half, and they're dying within an hour or two. So you have to talk about, at the end of our heat stress training, we're going to talk about the 5 different types of heat illnesses. We're going to talk about using a buddy system. We're going to talk about proper hydration. And you're going to measure those, and people should be able to repeat those issues of what heat exhaustion is versus heat stroke. Bloom's taxonomy, there's a couple people that are big training ones, and they talked about learning objectives. This is the toughest thing, I think, when I've been involved in training, is that when we go in there and they're going to do training, we just ask them, if you're going to train an hour, what's 1 or 2 or 3 objectives you're going to learn? And you would be surprised that you have people who've been doing this for 10, 20, 30 years. They can't think of what an objective is. I says, well, all right, you're going to teach them on the safe use of chemicals. What will they learn at the end of your hour? And you get a blank stare. That's not good. What you want to do is you want to say, okay, they'll at the end of the hour, they'll know the 9 OSHA pictograms or the GHS pictograms. They'll know some of the terms like acute exposure, chronic exposure. They'll know what a health hazard is versus a physical hazard. And those are things you can measure. And I'm a fan of giving a little 3-question, 5-question quiz at the end of an hour of training, because then you can verify people actually learn something. So all this creating objectives, describe the 9 pictograms, explain the difference between acute and chronic, be able to solve how to find a data sheet at our facility. These are all different ways to make it a learning objective. I literally have watched people spend a day and they can't write them, and it is very frustrating if somebody doesn't explain what it would look like. So you need to show examples of it. So that's something I always get. Whenever I do these presentations at the national conferences, what are 3 learning objectives that they'll learn after your hour of presentation? For me, it's easy, but for a lot of people, they'll say, well, they'll be smarter in rigging. That's not a measurable objective. Learning objectives, like in this, you'll be able to explain the specific ASP blueprints, and I just did it for the ASP, but there's CSP, CHST, all these have training. Concepts related to training education to prepare for the exam. You'll be able to explain the blueprint topic. So you go to bscp.org and you can go to the blueprint for any one of these tests, and you'll always see training and communication. Lesson plans are very common in the elementary, grade school, high school education. The teachers put together exactly what is going to be covered on August 16th. Tomorrow's lesson's already been pre-planned, and it makes it easier for somebody that has to come in and fill in if the teacher gets sick or has an injury or something else. And that's very much a standardized process. The teachers go through training on how to prepare lesson plans. For safety and health training, not so much. When I worked at the OSHA Training Institute and other facilities, they didn't really have this diagrammed out. This makes it a lot easier for everybody to understand what's going to be covered and how you can measure objectives. But a lot of people, they don't have these plans. They don't have the materials sometimes. So we talk about, what are you going to cover? What are the sequences? A very good case of lesson planning is if you take AHA's Red Cross and First Aid class. They'll tell you how to go through it. They give you a DVD to help you. You go in and cover this module first. You go over a sample in the book, answer some questions, and you go into the next module, and so on. There's a practical exam where you might have to go in and show them how to put a bandage on a wound or how to inject a EpiPen. Those are examples where AHA has a very solid lesson plan. So if you make a class for a day, you can use a model like that and help think, okay, what do I want to do? What exercises are going to have? So yesterday I was teaching electrical safety for an hour. I had them all be able to show me how to use a receptacle tester and a voltage detector. Very simple items, but we got to talk about why you use it, where does it require in the OSHA standards, and what do you want to have and where do you buy it. And these are things that, I'm dealing with safety directors. I had 11 safety directors out there, and we're just showing them all these things for, you know, what I call basic electrical safety. Informal training is what a lot of people do. I was just dealing with somebody that worked at a job whose boss left for a leave issue, and nobody's training that person. And after 7 days sitting at a desk and nobody's helping, they just said, I'm going to quit. You know, you spend a lot of money to hire a person and nobody's training you. That's no good. You know, there should be always a backup for whoever's going to be in charge of training or managing a facility. I mean, this is just bad planning and bad management. So, I mean, you know, you spend a lot of time and hours, and you can figure out what that costs you to hire a person. Then you're going to have a person walk out because nobody's going to train them and show them what they even do. And I'm thinking, you're paying a person a week to sit at a desk, and you don't even know that? That's not any good. But informal training is, you know, how do you put in the payroll? How do you go in and turn the computer on? How do you use our software for putting in the accidents? These are all things that you typically would do informally. You may have a formal training program. It may not be. You know, I always look at the timesheets. You know, you're not going to go take a class on a timesheet. They'll probably have to show it to you and go through it. So I have a lot of training questions, but let's go through one. These are knowledge checks. These are like what will appear on the exams. What method and practice of teaching adult learners? What is that called? I gave you this one without teaching it before, and the reason I wanted to do it because this popped up on I think the ASP, and I was like, wow, that's normally a CIT question. Anybody want to take a guess? You can put in the chat. Okay, good, very good. The answer is B, androgyny. Okay, that's, you know, it's a tough question, you know, and you know, androgyny, method of teaching adults, pedagogy, I'm probably saying it wrong, is working with the kids. Tactile learning is where you do by learning and touching, or kinesthetics. You'll hear that word kinesthetics where people are showing how to people to do it hands-on. I do the job, you do the job. I show you how to lubricate the part, you lubricate the part. That's a high retention. You know, the trouble is, it takes time. Sometimes it takes repetition. And it's not like I can show you how to drive a car in 20 minutes and then you know how to drive a car 3 weeks later. It won't work that way. You'll have accidents. So a lot of this takes practice and different styles. There's 3 different ideas, you know, the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic, hands-on. Those are 3 big training styles that you would normally get. So safety training work is mandatory by almost any country, and the outcome that has the most significance when you do training is what? This is a tougher question. Achieving a satisfactory score on a training exam, obtaining certification for a designated task, observing a decrease in the reported injuries, validating knowledge applications through job performance. This is a tough question. And, you know, there's a couple things when you take the test. Try to eliminate it, get it down to 2 questions. You know, obviously, you're not there to get certification. Okay, so what do you think? We can eliminate one of them real easy. This is a tough question. Remember, they won't see your answer on the video. Okay, very good. D is the answer. Validating the knowledge through job performance. Ideally, if I go in and I teach you forklift training and I put you through the written test, I made you do a practical in the facility, when I come out and see you next week and you're running the forklift, you should be going pretty good. You're validating that you learned it through the job performance. Same thing as if I'm going to go out there and teach you how to bond and ground a flammable liquid drum and dispense a chemical into a smaller container. I should see that the next time I go out there. I've walked you through it. I've had you demonstrate it. And again, you know, the training evaluation. After you've done the training, you want to evaluate it. There's different ways. Again, 4 different levels. When you get into CIT, you got to know all the 4 levels. But the idea is that you're going to be able to say, okay, how did it go? You know, a lot of times I go into these conferences they don't evaluate the training, and they don't know who's good or bad. I mean, you don't want to bring a bad speaker back, but usually you would go through and ask the audience what they think. First one is the reaction level. That's where they pass out the survey, rate the topic, the instructor's knowledge, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever you want to use. That's from the Likert evaluation method. And then, did the person actually learn? We're going to make them pass a test. So when I was teaching the OSHA 511 class, which is the industry standards class, they have to take a 35-question multiple choice for answers, just like these certification exams, to pass that class. So that's a level turn. We're going to see if they learned. And then, level 3, we can go out there and watch them work and see how their behavior has changed. When we go defensive driving, are they driving the vehicles safer? When we go over fall protection, they're wearing the fall protection correctly. And then, hopefully, we can get some results. Did the training make a difference? Did it lower accidents? Did we see improvements? Did we see more compliance on our audits and everything else? So those are the 4 levels. You don't have to know, other than the CIT, what these actual are, but you have to remember that we do want to monitor the training. So Kirkpatrick was a person that did a lot of work with training evaluations. I'm kind of surprised because other than the CIT, they didn't use much Kirkpatrick, but the ASP tests have lately mentioned what are the 4 different stages under the Kirkpatrick thing. Same thing, reaction, learning, behavior, results. Did the behavior get the desired results? Did we reduce the injuries? Were management involvement in collecting the data improved? Okay. So validation of learning from training programs is best by measuring what? Learning objective achievements, scores on practical exams, overall attendance on training programs, scores on written test. Well, we can eliminate B and D because they're the same answer. They're scores. So it's going to be A or C. What do you think? Okay. Very good. Learning objective achievements. Remember, we're making a training, we're going to have a learning objectives. And at the end of the ladder safety training, the employees will know how to inspect the ladder. The employees will know how to use the ladder correctly, face the ladder with a firm grip. That's the new thing on all the ladders now. No more two-handed work on an extension ladder or a step ladder, unless the ladder has a podium or a platform. So you're going to cover these items, and these are easily measurable. When you go out there, next time I see the ladder, are they using it? We cover these issues. If not, we're going to do recoaching or retraining, because obviously something didn't get through there. The Kirkpatrick model, there's another part of it. We talk about reaction, learning, behavior, and results. He adds a 5th one. That's not in the CIT, but it's in his model, and they've asked about this 5th model, which I'm surprised in the ASP. Is there a return on the investment? I.e., did we get a result by doing the training and spending $10,000, whatever amount of training? Did we receive a return on our investments? Did our injuries go down? Was the training effort saving us money? Or did we spend $50,000 on training and nothing was saved? That's what Kirkpatrick's talking about. I do this all the time when I talk about benchmarking. What is your company's injury rate compared to the industry average? That's a separate class under safety management, but the idea, when I was dealing with the large hotel, the person that is the safety person at this 1,000-person hotel with 20 languages started in 2017. In 2017, there were 42 injuries for those 1,000 people. They were above the industry rate for the hotels. Last year, there was only 14 injuries. They were way below the industry average. And I call 50% below, they were world class. So that's an example. The amount of money you can figure out that person spent on training, they've saved, we figured, $800,000 from lower worker comp and less injuries. 800,000. We figured training was about 25,000. You know, her salary, let's say it's 100,000, still not close to 800,000. So the return on investment was her salary plus training, everything else. We got 6 times our money back. And, you know, as I look at it, I take that $800,000 in savings at a 5% margin in the hotel industry. She has sold $16 million. And when you sit there and you look at what her savings are as a result of sales, she would be the highest salesperson in the company by triple. So I use this because you have to promote yourself in safety. You have to be able to show we're spending the money, we're getting a value on it, it's having results. And if you don't measure it, it looks like you're spending all this money and the bosses don't even know if it's even worth it. And if you can't justify it, and they have to make a tough decision where, you know, you're going to go and cut some staff, that's the staff that might get cut because they can't say, well, I don't even know what that person does. I mean, they do training, but I don't think we can just have it to HR. So what evaluation is a method of judging the value of the training while the program activities and well, this one's easy. This time I covered it, and we all should be able to guess it. Kirkpatrick, summative, informative, or formative. Now, oh, well, this is a different one. It's not Kirkpatrick. I'm going to tell you that real quick. It's not Kirkpatrick. Judging the value of the training program. We didn't cover it that side. We covered Kirkpatrick's method, but the answer is going to be B, C, or D. Very good. Formative training. Formative method. You're looking at the training evaluation and forming a judgment really on what it was. You know, you look at this and you're thinking, this is on the ASP CSP? Yeah, it's on there. That's why when I look at the results of hundreds of people who've taken this CSP ASP test, they're like 19 training communication questions, they might get 7 or 9. That's not good. You want to get at least 60%. So that's why we go over it. That's why the BSCP study group has a lot of training questions on it, because that's going to be on it. With the CHST, SMS, STS, STSC, not such a tough question. More common questions. Adult learnings. They're always going to ask you about adult learnings. You're going to get a question. What do adults want to learn? They want it relevant. They don't want to hear about something where you're talking about fall protection and steel erection and you're in a manufacturing environment and their fall hazards might be on a mezzanine or on top of a platform. They want it relevant to what they do. When I go to a lot of places, I talk about, you know, what do you have for confined spaces? And we talk about confined spaces. That might be their sump pit, their auto change pit. We won't go into what a grain elevator confined space is because it's a manufacturing facility. That's what I mean by relevant. They want knowledge. So I always ask people what their experiences are in it, because people have an incredible amount of experience, way more than you do. You do a class of 25 people, that's going to give you a lot of experience, what they've seen in the happen, and that tells you as a safety person, we need to address some of these issues because they've had some close calls, and we got to go in there. We try to make sure that, you know, they like working together, so we always make a project, whether it be looking up standards, talking about how to write a job hazard analysis, how to walk through a confined space. We try to work in teams so we can get people go through it. Some people are natural, they know how to do everything, not so much for everybody else. Again, safety training and education, typically classified in 2 categories, formal and informal. In case of informal training, it includes on the job. It may necessitate 35% more time compared to formal training covering the same material. It's not limited to the work environment alone, and it constitutes 20% of adult training. A couple statistics, and this is a tough question. Again, this is coming from ExamCore, which BSCP sells for $999. They'll tell you the reference, but they won't tell you the answer if you got it wrong. You know, you have to go look it up. And of course, there's, I don't want to say 30, 40, 50 books at about $150 a piece. Nobody's going to go buy those books unless their company's super rich. So what do you think? This is a tough one. Okay. Formal, informal. There it is. Informal training is on the job. And you think all these things could be right. It could be. But, you're not going to have to know too many percentages and statistics. You'll have to know the Pareto principle, 80%, 20%. That means 20% of the people or causes could cause 80% of the losses, that kind of thing. You might get the pyramid of learning where they're going to talk about, 10% is learned by reading, 20% by watching. Training motivation. Motivation is the reason they work safely. So they'll ask that question in a different format. They'll say, the main reason employees want to work safe is they're getting a bonus, they're motivated, things like that. But motivation is the issue. And training convinces the worker to perform the desired behavior. That's the idea. They understand why we do this. I have a lot of accidents where they didn't understand why we need a guard on a belt sander, why we need to bond and ground the spray paint nozzle to the material we're spraying, because these have caused losses, huge losses. I also ask when I do training classes, what do we want to learn? We're going to be here for 4 days in a class. They want to learn about fall protecting anchorages. Oh, I'm going to put a roof anchorage. It's going to be $5,000. How do I know it's $5,000? You could buy, Flood Brothers in Chicago. You got Safety Anchors, other companies on LinkedIn that I reference that will test the anchorage. They get, dynamometers and they pull on it and they see if it holds it. They want to know a little bit about electrical hazards of excavation, confined space, training techniques, and so on. And I always, ask, what were some questions, Student had kids with them, not conducive for adult learnings. You don't want, little kids running around while dad's trying to learn or mom's trying to learn. Maybe that might be a time they might take the class at home. And again, they brought dinner for 2 in a classroom of 30. Not good. Everybody else is like, I'd like dinner. That's not good. Equipment failed during training. That's every other year for me. The light bulb goes off. What are you going to do? Well, I have a spare projector. The computer shuts off, gives you the black screen. I have a spare computer in my car. People are like, why would you have a spare computer? Because every 2 years something happens and you're going to cancel the training and try to get everybody back together. Good luck. What's the first step in training process? This one you should know by heart. When determining a program is necessary, we do a training needs assessment, develop our learning objectives, design the training, evaluate the trainer. That's that cycle right off the bat, the first slide. This one you got to know. They always got to know. Very good. Training needs assessment. Thanks, Elise. And then instructional materials. I hate to say I grew up in the days where all we had is a flip chart. And then they came up with overheads. And then they came up with slides. Then PowerPoint came up. And then the last 20 years, PowerPoint's been the dominant training material. But you can use a combination of them. They got dry erase boards. I bring in a lot of hands-on. And when I work with other people, and I do a lot of training of instructors, I tell them, you're going to teach 8 to noon. What is the hands-on class activity you're going to do? And they say, well, I got, 3 PowerPoints. I said, no, you got to bring a hands-on activity. You can do one on every topic. It's just a matter, do you have a truck to bring all this stuff? But I don't ask for much. I just said, I want something where you're going to bring in hands-on. I don't care if it's a power tool, or in my case, a voltage meter and some different electrical equipment. In fall protection, I'll bring the fall harnesses and other things. You can do this. This is making your training good. It's interactive. And that's what you want to have. Visual aids are good. Again, it has to lie in with the learning outcomes. If you're going to go out there and talk about ladder safety and you don't talk about a ladder on your photos or your pictures, and you're going to go talk about your fall issues, and maybe that's not the objective then. And again, everything should be able to read. So I always go back, wherever I'm teaching, can I read the slides in the back of the room? That's my test. And sometimes you go in, it's a big room. And, so I always tell people, 24, size 24 font, you can read in most rooms. If they've got a gymnasium, that's a poor training place. Poor. And I've been in that case. Well, we got a gym. I says, no, it's too big. It's too much light. You need to have a training room that's going. We're not putting 100 people in a room. Because, yeah, you can teach 100 people, but are they going to learn? And I've slowly convinced clients to get away from 180. You can do that for a general session at the beginning with the president, but break out into smaller groups so people can actually learn. Otherwise, the people sitting back 50, 70 feet, they're not really learning, you know. 5 levels of Kirkpatrick. Okay, remember there's the 4 levels that are common for everything. What was his 5th one? Reaction, learning behavior, results in return on investment. So, design materials. Again, you can't read in the back room. That's bad. I went to the National ASP conference, and I took 14 sessions, and 6 of them had stuff this small on the screen. I'm not kidding you. I couldn't read it. And you don't have a handout. It looks kind of cool, but if you can't read it, it's not going to help you. And I'm not like sitting in the back. I'm sitting in the front, so that's bad. Again, you know, the rule of thumb, 6 lines, 6 words per text, you know, that kind of thing is good. Don't be putting 100 words on a slide. And again, format the material so that it's organized. You know, people don't want to see capital letters all over on this thing. That would be horrible. Use words that people understand. You know, and if you got to deal with, you know, different languages, there's different terms for safety and scaffolds and everything else. And, you know, when I had to work with China OSHA, you know, I'm going to speak English and they're going to bring a translator. And I remember the first year they brought the translator, none of the safety terms. You know, when we start talking competent person, scaffold, outrigger, none of it translated. And I says, you need to bring a civil engineer that speaks English so then we can translate these construction terms to the compliance officers from China. So the learning pyramid. You would think there's a lot of questions on it, but they generally ask you which is more conducive. Obviously, you know, you're teaching somebody directly, hands-on, best. Worst one is what you did in college. They had the professor sitting at a lectern in a big classroom of 100 people. 5% of the time you're going to learn. That's no good. You know, so I always think it's interesting. The education institutes violate this the worst, you know. And that's why, you know, when I teach at the universities, I says, we're not going to do the lecture hall style. Get me out of this big room and put us in a room. And I says, no more than 25 people. You know, you can put more, but are they going to learn? So, ones that always they ask you, which is better, reading or lecture? It's always reading. Lecture is always the worst. They'll ask you, role-playing discussion groups, is that better than a PowerPoint? Sure. So these are things you have to know. I just practice it. You know, if you can just sit there and think, can I put this in order? You know, because you'll get 2 or 3 of these, and they'll ask you which is the best or which is the worst. I mean, that's how they'll do it. And this is almost always on the CSP test for sure, and a lot of times on the ASP, always on the CIT test. Training methods, again, lectures ineffective. They limit activity. The person just stalks. Good discussion increases learning because now it's practical. Brainstorming is a concept they've gotten into. It's part of teaching. I use it all the time. You know what brainstorming is? You're trying to solve a problem or an accident investigation, and we just get ideas. And all you do, and I learned this back in the early 90s, we just list it. There's nothing wrong. What do you think we want to learn today? Confined space, lockout, silica, ergonomics. We just list it. Get the universe out. Nobody's going to criticize one or not. And then when we're all done out of ideas, then we can go through each one. And if we have, let's say, 5 hours to teach 1 hour each topic, we can do voting and we can give everybody 5 stickers and say, okay, put a sticker by which one you want of your 5 topics. You got 10 topics here. We're only going to be able to do this. So this is different things you can do. Case studies are always good because some people are shocked. I was showing the class Monday that one of the largest companies in the United States at one of their facilities in North Carolina sent the worker to go get 216 pounds or about 100 kilograms of dry ice in her car They just said they'll load it up in your passenger seat, and then you just drive back, and we'll have somebody lift it. Because, you know, 216 pounds, you can't even lift it. That's unsafe. Well, dry ice is carbon dioxide. So she drives to the facility 20 minutes. They load it in her car, and she dies on the side of the road. She passed out from the lack of oxygen, and as it evaporated more, it pushed out all the oxygen, and she died. And you think, this is one of the largest companies in the country. They killed the worker, and you know, the worker, dry ice doesn't mean it. It's like, well, okay, it's like ice. Wow, look at it, fogs. I mean, this is incredible. You know, you should have had it in the back of a pickup truck. I mean, why wouldn't you do it? I mean, I would have it delivered. I mean, you're one of the largest companies in the world. Just call up the dry ice company and said, hey, deliver us 216 pounds. It makes no sense. You lost a worker. You know, OSHA cited them, said you didn't teach them in the hazards of carbon dioxide. I mean, I look at that, and people in the class, you know, because we had a couple of people use dry ice in their facility, they're like, I would never do that. Well, that's where you talk about it. You got to know what people are doing. Why would you have the dry ice? Do we have a process, program, and procedures for it? And those are wide opening. And you know, by the time we're done at Tuesday for this class, you know, the person says, I've got like 12 things I got to tell my company we got to do. There's a lot of things, and I understand why we got to do it now. Role play. You take AHA, First Aid, CPR, Red Cross, National Safety Council. They make you do the mannequin. You're going to learn. I could show it to you. You got to go down about 2 inches of compression, do it about, you know, every 120 beats, 120 pushes a minute. But when you have to do it, different animal. Especially now here, I put it on a table, but they're on their knees. Now that's hard on your knees. You're going to find out, wow, this is hard. It's tiring. The new mannequins have 3 lights that'll tell you you're doing it right or wrong. That gives you positive feedback right there. That's really popular, you know. And once you do it right, you have that memory, muscle memory of how to do it. So the trainees will, you know, presenting a real case, how to deal with it. When do you do CPR? When do you don't? Hands-on training. Again, we got to back up a forklift. You know, he's back there. I would tell the person, it'd be nice if you could stand to the side, because, you know, unless this person's very experienced, you could get pinned between it. I mean, I've had accidents where people are moving vehicles and they go hit the pedal too fast and it comes back and it crushes them. So you want to do it. When I go in and teach fall protection, we get everybody in a harness. You got to demonstrate, as one of our training objectives, you will be able to put on a body harness at the end of the class. So we're going to go over here, and I take pictures of them so I can show that they know how to do it. Now, again, you know how to do it today. You don't put one on for 5 years, you may not remember. But if you're going to do it next week, you'll probably do it right, because you've already practiced it. You've taken your time, you know how to do it. Training preparation. The one question they ask, no matter what test it is, how many minutes do you show up? It's 30 minutes. 30 minutes beforehand. I always do 30 minutes, if not longer. If I've never been there before, I'd like to be there sometimes a lot earlier, because I want to make sure things work. You know, is my computer going to work with your projector? Is there a cable between the projector and the computer? I want to lay out. I'm doing tool safety here. I'm bringing out all my tools and stuff, and I want a place to lay them out so I can show the people the tools. And, you know, I'm giving out different copies of the presentation, because, like I said, today they don't want to watch it and take notes. They want to write on the sheets with the slides and stuff. And then we talk about hello, good morning, everything else when they first come in. You know, that's what you want to do, be positive. Then we identify emergency routes and restrooms. I also cover what to do in case of power outage, fire, tornadoes, everything else. In the training environment, we got to go in and we make sure it's comfortable. You got to give them tables. If you're going to be there for the day, you got to have a table to write on. You can't sit them in a chair and they're going to write in their chair. It's just not going to work. It's uncomfortable. It's very hard to do. It's not going to be very good for anybody. I've had to teach everywhere. But, you know, when you look at this one, the first thing you're going to see, boy, that slide's hard to see. That's hard to see. You know, and this is the trouble. I would dim the front set of lights if I could, because I could, you know, the screen is not bright enough and the lights are washing it out with a lot of light. So, you know, you would try to go through it. And, you know, again, they're paying you to show up and teach. You know, you got to try to work it and make it go in there. Again, environments want to be conducive. You make a good first impression. I always tell people, don't be wearing the, ripped T-shirt and torn jeans coming in and do a training class with a bunch of professionals. That's not going to be a good impression. And and you would think you wouldn't have to tell people this, but this is how people learn. A lot of times they've never been there. They're just going to show up what they wear at work, which is not necessarily what you want to do. And like I said, you dress to the audience level. So I always tell people, if the boss is wearing the suit, you're going to be wearing a suit too. So lots of questions. Some people call it stump the student. I'm going to ask questions, go over that requirement, and then be positive. Tell people very good. Positive feedback. You should be giving feedback all the time. When somebody counted my feedback, they said, you give positive feedback almost every minute, every other minute. Because I tell people, I ask them questions. What do you do? Thank you. Very good comment. That's excellent. Things like that is what you want to do. Because some people just talk and there's no interaction. And again, hands-on. This is the rescue Randy. I always argue about with Paul. Paul Sadi is one of the best trainers in the country. And, he gets the rescue Randy out there for the confined space. This is 180 pounds, 90 kilograms. I'm not going to move it. I'm not going to lift it. I'm not going to have three of us. We're going to get somebody hurt doing that. But, the people who are doing EMS and everything else, they got to deal with real life. They got to be able to move this thing. If you're out there in safety, you just need to know how to get it out. Why, when you put the mannequin in there, it might be a little bit tough to get through this hole because shoulders are a little bit bigger and everything else. What is the name of the activities where people are encouraged to freely suggest their ideas, no matter how outlandish or conventional? Usually it's not outlandish or conventional. Maybe an open, non-judgmental environment where goals generate many ideas as possible. Brainstorming, fishbowl, ad-lib, or icebreaker. What do you think? What was that called? Very good. Brainstorming. And then I keep a record of all the training. Like here I was teaching Adam Silica train. Give them a card. They completed a competent person or Silica. If you're going to say it's a competent person, you better test them. Because you want proof they actually learn the stuff related to Silica. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to stop share. Stop the recording.